Welcome to the Strength for Life podcast, where smart strength training meets real life. We're Dr. Matt and Nicole Klingler, founders of Village Fitness and Physical Therapy. Here, you'll learn what really works in the gym, at home, and for life. Welcome back to the Strength for Life podcast. I'm Dr. Matt Klingler, physical therapist.
And I'm Nicole Klingler. And on today's episode, we're diving into one of the most underrated and misunderstood nutrients in the entire health world, protein.
You see, for decades, the nutrition conversation has been dominated by this noisy tug-of-war between carbs and fat. And on one side, you have this camp shouting, fat is the enemy. We should be eating refined grains, heart-healthy whole grains. And on the other side, you have the carbs are the enemy people saying that carbohydrates are the root cause of our sin nature. Maybe not our sin nature, but at least inflammation, diabetes, and weight gain. And yet, at the same time, there's another macronutrient that we've forgotten about.
And that one is protein. So it's really been a battle between these three macronutrients. And there's been different times when each one is a little bit overemphasized. And I really think that protein has been kind of on the sidelines and really overlooked in the past few years.
So today we're going to talk all about protein. We're going to answer all the common questions we get. How much do you need? What are the best sources? And when do you need to consume protein? We're also going to talk about specific groups like do women need more protein? Do older folks need more protein? If you're really active, do you need more protein? We're going to cover all of that and more in today's episode. So hang on to your hat. Now, back in the early days of Village, we actually didn't talk a lot about protein. And I think it was one of the mistakes that we made as health business owners. We were really into the fat versus carbs craze and movement. We were very much on the side, and I'd say you still are, that if you want to lose body fat, you need to reduce your carbohydrate intake and bias your diet probably more towards healthy fats. And now we've kind of shifted more towards this understanding of just how important protein is. So Nicole, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think we've seen over the years through, coaching thousands of clients and through our own research and reading and studying that protein is absolutely essential for building muscle, preserving strength, and really aging powerfully. It's not just, I need to get protein in, but it should be a non-negotiable in our diets.
So how much protein do we actually need? And if you want to kind of start from somewhere, I would start with trying to understand what the government recommends, or the RDA, the recommended dietary allowance of protein. So right now it's about 0.36 grams per pound of body weight. Now, here's why that's laughably small and not enough. So if we were to take that RDA and apply it to me, I'm about 185 pounds, it's 67 grams per day. How about for you, Nicole?
So I'm about 120 pounds, so that would be only 43 grams of protein a day for me. So if you zoom out on, us, to very active adults, that would be only about 8 to 9% of our total calories for the day, which is just a tiny slice of, our entire plate. And that's where we have it all wrong. So that we really need that to be a much bigger, slice or size of our plate. Instead of an eighth or a tenth of it, it really should be about half of our plate, because that's really what's going to help us to build and protect the muscle that we need as we age.
Because if you're only getting, 8 or 9% of your calories from protein, that means you're going to be getting, 91 or 92% of your calories from carbs and fat. And that can be a good thing, but mostly I think is going to be a bad thing for people, because they're going to get most of those calories from, foods that are going to spike their blood sugar and lead to body fat storage and probably chronic health problems long term. So it's not just not getting enough protein, but it's the addition of the other things that you're going to add in to make up the rest of your calories that can cause problems. So where did we even come up with this 0.36 grams per pound of body weight? It comes from something called nitrogen balance. And here's the key. So protein is the only macronutrient that contains nitrogen. Fat does not have nitrogen. Carbs don't have nitrogen, but protein is loaded with nitrogen. It's part of the amino acids that make up protein. So if you measure how much nitrogen a person eats and how much nitrogen they lose, brace yourself, this is kind of disgusting, in their pee, in their poop, in their skin, their nails, etc. Everything that comes off of us, if you measure the amount of nitrogen that comes out of you or off of you, you can kind of get this like net balance thing. And they call this net nitrogen balance.
So you can think of it like tracking in your checking account. So for every gram of protein that you eat, you get a deposit of nitrogen into the account, and every gram of nitrogen that you lose is like a withdrawal. So if deposits and withdrawals are equal, that equals, a zero balance. And so that's like saying, as long as I'm not going into debt, then I'm financially thriving. Sure, you're maybe, you're not going broke, but you're also not saving for your future, investing, or building wealth. And that nitrogen balance really tells us the bare minimum to avoid muscle bankruptcy. It doesn't tell us how much we actually need to grow, get stronger, and stay functional as we age.
And if you're like me, you want to build up a healthy retirement, a 401k, if you will, so that when you get to your older age, you have something to withdraw from. And I think that muscle is not perfectly analogous to building a 401k, but it's similar. It's like when you get to be 65, 75, 85 years old, the more muscle you built in your younger years, the more you're going to have to draw upon as age sets in and it becomes tougher to build muscle. You start to lose muscle. If you're starting from a bigger amount, you're going to have a lot more to draw from. So now we want to look at where the rubber actually meets the road. These nitrogen balance studies are fine, but does more protein actually increase the preservation of muscle? And we have large-scale studies that have demonstrated this. The Health, Aging, and Body Composition study looked at thousands of older adults, and they split them up into different groups based on their protein intake. And they found that those in the highest group lost 40% less muscle than those in the lowest group over the course of about 3 years. And what's crazy is that the low group was eating about the RDA amount of protein. So what the government recommends that we eat, that 0.36 grams per pound, that was what they considered to be the low group for protein intake. And they lost 40% more muscle than the high protein group. And so further evidence demonstrates that the current RDA for protein simply is not sufficient. So one of the big problems with a lot of research studies today is that they're based on human reporting of how much protein they've eaten or how much carbs or how much fat or how many calories we've eaten. It's like self-reported. And the problem with that, as you might guess, is that humans are terrible self-reporters. We tend to not report when we have the handful of candy as we go past the candy dish at work if we're part of a study or whatever. I know this because I have children, and they tend to be misleading in the facts that they report. And then if you ask one of their siblings, they will tell you exactly what happened, right?
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, no, he had 3 gummies, not 2. I watched it happen. No, I had 2 gummies, not 3. Anyways, I digress. So to solve this problem, researchers did something kind of weird. They brought in a bunch of subjects to a metabolic ward and had them contained to eliminate as many variables as possible. And they had people consume a hypercaloric diet, meaning they ate more calories than they needed to maintain their baseline, burn rate. And what they found was that all 3 of these groups that they split people in gained weight. But what determined a lot of what they gained, whether it was fat or muscle, depended on the composition of what they were eating. And they split the groups based on protein intake. There was a low, a medium, and a high protein intake group. The low group had about 0.32 grams per pound of body weight per day, pretty similar to the RDA. The middle group had 0.82, and the high protein group had 1.36 grams per pound per day. So quite a bit. That's very, very high protein intake. For me at 185 pounds, that's over 200 grams of protein per day. And here's what they found in the study. They found that the body weight of all of them went up. The fat mass of all of them went up pretty similarly, but the lean mass in the low protein group actually decreased. They lost lean mass even though they were eating an excess of calories, whereas the higher, medium, and high protein groups gained lean mass, which is what we want. We want to gain or preserve muscle as we lose body fat. You can also see the same kind of results in intervention data. For example, a randomized control trial in older men showed that eating 2 times the RDA for 10 weeks, 2 times the RDA of protein for 10 weeks, so like 0.7 grams or so per pound, produced gains in lean mass and leg power versus just sticking to the RDA without just being in a calorie deficit.
So how much protein should you be eating? So a good easy number for most people to remember is 100 grams of protein per day. And that should just be like baseline minimum for all adults, kind of no matter what life stage you're in. However, if you weigh more than 140 pounds, you're going to want to use the formula 0.72 grams per pound of body weight. So you really want to get, so say you're 150 pounds, then that's like 108 grams of protein. If you're 200 pounds, that's more like 140 grams of protein. There are going to be certain groups of people that will need differing amounts, which we're going to get into in just a moment. But in general, minimum 100 grams of protein per day. And then if you break that up, between meals, that's anywhere between like 30 to 40 grams of protein per meal each day.
So there are some specific groups that need more protein, and one of those is active people. Or athletes, or those looking to build muscle. So most of our clients, especially lately, I've found that people come to us saying, I want to build muscle. I want to build strength. I love that too. Yeah.
We used to be more like 10 years ago, we would just get people saying, I just want to lose fat. I just want to lose weight. And now I think people are realizing that like when they put on muscle and strength, like that's going to have a much bigger effect on their life than just losing weight will. Because the reality is if they lose weight, they'll lose both, fat and muscle. Yep. And often they do it in an unsustainable way. Whereas
they end up losing the muscle and the fat, and then they gain back fat.
Yeah, it's really sad.
Yeah. So you wind up with people that are skinny fat, and that's not good because not only are you weak, but you're also fat, and then they get sick, and then they're not strong enough to withstand the sickness. It's a slippery slope. But I digress. Now we're seeing a lot more people saying, I want to build muscle. I want to build strength, which is awesome because that is a very solvable problem for people. And so if that's you need more protein than the normal person. So instead of that 0.7, you're probably going to need more like 1 gram per pound. And if you're in a caloric restriction, you want to bias even more of your diet towards protein, maybe more like 1.1 to 1.2 grams per pound. There was a 2018 meta-analysis that showed that muscle gain plateaus for most people around 0.7 grams per pound. But some people may need up to 1 gram per pound of body weight. But protein has this like thermic effect when you eat it. So it causes you to just burn more calories as a result of eating it. It's also very, very filling. So if you're trying to be in a caloric deficit, which we'll get to in just a second, having more protein on board will help you to not want to eat as much.
Yeah, you'll notice like if you're trying to restrict calories and, you look at a plate, like you can get way more, bang for your buck if you're eating a lot of protein. Whereas if you look at carbohydrates, it's like all of your carbohydrates and calories are in like half a banana. And so you're going to feel a lot fuller, a lot more satiated, and honestly be a lot more successful if you are trying to lose weight, if you have a higher protein intake. Absolutely.
Now, if you want to lose weight, you want to lose body fat, how much protein should you be intaking? So if you want to lose weight or fat specifically, you need to be in a calorie deficit, meaning you need to eat fewer calories than you burn. But the catch is when you're in a deficit, you're not just going to lose fat, you're also going to lose muscle. And especially without resistance training, you're not going to have that signal or that stimulus to maintain your muscle. And if you're not resistance training, if you're in a caloric deficit, you can lose as much as 15% of your total body weight from lean mass, which is not good. We don't want to lose lean mass. And I'm going to talk about GLP-1s like Ozempic in just a second. But there was a research study that showed that up to 40% of the weight that people lose when they take GLP-1s can come from lean mass. And I think that's probably less a result of the drug and more a result of just how rapidly people are losing weight on these drugs. So now the leaner you are and the bigger your calorie deficit, the more muscle people tend to lose. And this is why we recommend people lose weight slowly as opposed to rapidly. It's much easier to keep the weight off if you lose it at like a rate of 1 to 1.5% of your body weight per week. So if you're 200 pounds, you're looking at like 2 pounds per week of weight loss. Here's where protein comes in. So caloric restriction lowers muscle protein synthesis, which is kind of the process by which we maintain or increase muscle mass. And eating more protein helps to increase muscle protein synthesis, thereby preserving lean mass as you're losing weight. In layman's terms, strength training is kind of like the signal by which you tell your body that it needs to keep muscle. And I always tell people that tell me, hey, I want to lose body fat. They kind of understand intuitively, well, I don't want to lose my lean tissue, my muscle. And I tell them, if you're not strength training as you go through the weight loss process, a lot of that weight is going to come from strength, because muscle is very metabolically hungry tissue, meaning you have to give yourself a reason to keep it around. Strength training is that signal or that reason, and then protein is like the building blocks that signal needs to go and actually build or maintain the muscle. So you need both. You definitely need both. Another study compared two groups of resistance trained men on a 40% caloric deficit, which is a big deficit. And they found that the high protein group, which was eating about a gram per pound of body weight, lost only a half pound of lean mass in the study. So they almost lost purely fat, which is incredible. That's what we all want if we're trying to lose weight. The low protein group, conversely, which was right around the RDA, they were actually a little higher. It was 0.45 grams per pound. They lost 3 pounds of lean mass. So pretty significant difference between those two groups. And both groups lost about the same amount of fat, but the high protein group kept far more muscle. So now let's talk about GLP-1s like Ozempic and Wegovy. Now, these medications certainly speed up weight loss. And I want to be careful here because we are definitely not advocates of GLP-1s. I think that there's a time and a place for them. For some people, the benefits of reducing their blood sugar and their body weight can outweigh the potential cons and side effects that come with these drugs. But the reality is they're fairly new in terms of people taking them. We just don't have long-term studies on these drugs. And so if you're going to do something like this, obviously you need to work hand in hand with a physician that has a lot of experience with it. But I would exhaust all of your other options first. So we talked about how 40% of total weight loss can come from lean tissue as opposed to just fat when taking GLP-1s. But for these people, protein is arguably even more important than those who are, just dieting or trying to maintain through natural means. There is a 2025 study that has not been peer-reviewed yet, but it showed that GLP-1 users who ate more protein lost less muscle, and those eating less protein lost more muscle. This was especially true for folks that are, female or older. And strength training also matters. There was a interesting kind of article, not a research article, just kind of a write-up by some physicians at Massachusetts General Hospital, and they were saying that they've seen in their patients that those who maintain muscle the best and actually are the most successful with these GLP-1s are those that are consuming a high protein diet and that are strength training consistently. So the good news is those are the exact same things that anybody on a diet should be doing and anybody in general should be doing. So keep doing it whether or not you're taking GLP-1s. But I would say it's probably even more important if you are taking GLP-1s.
It's also even more important for people that are over the age of 50. So if you're over 50, you've probably heard how important protein is for preserving muscle. But the older we get, the more complex that picture becomes. So muscle loss with age isn't just normal, it's expected. Most adults start to lose about 0.5 to 1% of their muscle mass per year after the age of 50. But here's the kicker. We lose strength 2 to 5 times faster than we lose mass. And power, that declines even faster. So this progressive loss of muscle and strength is called sarcopenia, and it's one of the leading causes of frailty, falls, and loss of independence in older adults. And now a big part of that decline comes from moving less, and people just become more sedentary. They sit a lot more. But even when older adults eat protein, their bodies also don't respond as well to it as, say, like someone in their 20s. And this is called anabolic resistance. So in simple terms, if you're 25 years old and you're 70 years old, if you eat that same 20 grams of protein, the younger person, the 25-year-old, will actually get a better muscle building response than the person that's 70 years old. And that's because an older person's body just doesn't absorb or utilize the amino acids as efficiently as a 25-year-old's body. Mm-hmm. So what's the solution? there's two things: more protein and then better quality protein. So for older adults, here are the daily protein requirements using, grams per pound of body weight. Sedentary and healthy individuals need, like Matt said earlier, that 0.7 grams per pound of body weight every day. If you're recovering from injury or a surgery and say, you've gotten a hip replacement or a knee replacement, like that should actually go up because your body is actually needing to repair more tissues, and you tend to lose more fat and weight during that time. And you can also lose muscle mass like we talked about. So you want to go more like to 0.8 grams per pound of body weight or even more, especially if you're, an extended, bed rest and not as active during that time. And then if you're trying to lose weight or build muscle, you need at least 1 gram per pound of body weight. So that's more like 110 to 165 grams per day if you, weigh 150 pounds. And here's the next piece. You don't just have to hit your daily goal, all at once. You actually want to spread it out. So you want to get that, 35 to 40 grams of protein per meal. And that'll really help to maximize our muscle protein synthesis response. And then the quality of that protein also matters too. So there are studies that have shown that animal-based proteins are not nearly as effective as things like the whey and casein at stimulating muscle protein synthesis.
Say that again. So animal-based proteins are more effective.
Sorry, more effective. Did I say less? Sorry, less.
I'm
more
not
effective.
sure what you said, but okay. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, so animal-based proteins like whey and casein are way more effective at stimulating that muscle protein synthesis than plant-based proteins in this age group. So the study showed that 20 to 40 grams of soy protein had no effect on muscle protein synthesis for older adults, but that same amount of whey protein did. So essentially, if you're going to eat protein, whey protein, casein are going to be more effective for you if you are in that 50 and older group. And in some cases, if you are only eating plant-based protein, you even need to eat more. So it took about 60 grams of plant-based protein to match the same muscle building effect as it took for the same amount of, or for about 20 to 35 grams of animal-based protein. So if you're eating plant-based, you may need a higher total protein and probably a more strategic approach to protein variety and supplementation. And finally, protein without resistance training just, it doesn't work. So it's the most powerful combo for preventing and reversing sarcopenia. And, a lot of people as they age too, like even if they're eating enough protein, like they can still lose muscle mass if they're not doing the resistance training. So if you're over 50, you really need to prioritize that progressive strength training, eating high quality protein at every single meal. So don't skip it, and really try to hit that goal of at least 0.7 grams of protein per pound of body weight every single meal.
Nice. Okay, so let's talk about whether or not it matters when you eat your protein. So we've kind of hammered home how much protein to eat. Let's talk about when. Does it matter, in other words? And I remember reading Men's Health magazine as a teenager, and early in my personal training days, I thought it's so important that I get my protein shake after my workout. In fact, I was drinking a protein shake during the workout and a protein shake immediately after the workout, just so I didn't miss out on those gains. Turns out, I was 16 years old and probably didn't need as much protein back then as I do even now, but I certainly was not missing out on any proteins. So the research shows that window for post-workout proteins probably not as tight as we once thought. There are some studies that show increases in muscle protein synthesis when protein is consumed like immediately after exercise. But others have shown that you get pretty similar benefits whether you eat your protein 1 hour or even up to 3 hours after strength training. What they show is most important is the total amount of protein that you eat in a day. All other things considered equal, that is the biggest driver of muscle protein synthesis, and muscle building is how much total protein you consume in a day. So that's the real key. Get 0.73 grams per pound of body weight throughout the day, as opposed to, just trying to get it right in that after workout window. Now, I do recommend splitting your protein up throughout the day if possible. There was a research study that looked at total muscle protein synthesis throughout the day, and they had two groups. One group that ate 100 grams of protein split across 3 meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and one group that was skewed, meaning they had most of their protein at dinner And they found that the skewed group, even though they had the same total protein intake per day, had much lower levels of muscle protein synthesis than the even group. And I think this is a common just American dietary thing that we tend to eat more of our protein at night. Average people, I shouldn't say average people. The most common American breakfast food is what? Cereal, yes. And that is very high in carbohydrates, very low in protein. The most common American lunch food, what do you think? Sandwiches. We're thinking the same. This is good. Sandwiches, again, unless they're just like piled high with meat, probably pretty low in protein. So you roll out a lunch and you've eaten, I don't know, maybe 20 grams, 30 grams of protein. And then people usually have a big dinner that's often meat centric. Now there are unique cases where, there's vegetarians and vegans and whatnot, which we're not going to get into today. But a lot of people have that kind of dietary pattern where they eat a lot of their protein at night, and it doesn't keep muscle protein synthesis high consistently throughout the day. So while I would rather have somebody eating more total protein throughout the day than not, I think it's best to try and spread it, 30 to 40 grams each meal.
You'll also notice a better blood sugar response when you have protein in the morning versus carbohydrates. And so that'll just affect how your energy is throughout the day. It'll affect, all of your metabolic factors. It's just going to affect your health in general. When you eat more protein in the morning, you'll also notice you don't get that exercise, or like after you exercise or after you do something really strenuous, you won't feel as fatigued if you get protein in, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. You'll also notice in the afternoon, you won't have that kind of like slump where you kind of feel like you don't have energy. That really comes from usually a drop in your blood sugar because you've had large spikes from lots of carbohydrates, and then it's dropped way down and you kind of just feel like, ugh, I don't want to do anything. I just want to take a nap. I just want to lay on the couch. And then you get people saying like, I don't have energy to make dinner. And so it's kind of this like vicious cycle. So if you can start your day with higher protein and less carbohydrates, then you will just feel fuller longer. You'll have more energy throughout the day. Your blood sugar will be better regulated, and you'll just feel stronger in your workouts. Everything will go better if you have more protein at breakfast.
Nice. Tell us about protein and women.
Yeah,
Anything unique there?
Yeah, so women actually have a shorter and more sensitive window for post-exercise protein intake. And that's because estrogen plays a large role in blunting the muscle building response, which means that women don't get that same prolonged spike in muscle protein synthesis that men do after strength training, which is unfortunate. So men might have,
bummer.
Like 3 to 4 hours to refuel. Women should really try to get at least 30 grams of protein within 30 minutes of finishing their workout. And so I know that's challenging for a lot of women, especially because you're often squeezing in workouts in between, dropping kids off at school or getting to work. And so whatever you have to do to get that in, I often will have milk with protein powder and creatine right after I work out, and sometimes I'll even make that ahead of time. So I will get my workout or protein shake in after, and that just makes it so that you can maximize that muscle protein synthesis. And this is especially important if you're over 40 because your estrogen is naturally going to start declining after age 40, in the second half of your menstrual cycle, so during the luteal phase, and then if you're peri or postmenopausal, or if you're actively trying to build and maintain muscle mass. Again, it's not that you won't build muscle if you don't get it within that 30-minute window. There are days when that just doesn't happen for me after my strength training workout. However, you really want to try to maximize on those workouts and what you did in the gym. And the other thing is that women actually do better when they don't do strength training in a fasted state. So even a small dose of protein, like 10 to 15 grams before you work out, can really help your body not to break down muscle as much. And it can also set you up for a stronger recovery response afterwards. So protein timing does matter. Like Matt said, I'd rather you just get, more protein in throughout the day. But if you want to maximize, building muscle, maintaining muscle, and if you're a woman in one of those categories that I talked about, try to get 10 to 15 grams of protein before you work out, and then 30 grams of protein within that 30-minute window after you work out. I like to often have a beef stick before I work out, just because I often work out at 6 or 7 a.m. So I'll take that with me, eat it while I'm walking or driving to Village to get my strength training workout in. Or sometimes I'll have my protein drink before, just because, timing.
All right, let's talk about if all proteins are created equal. And mainly the question that we get is, can I eat plant-based protein instead of animal-based protein? And so again, muscle growth happens when we stimulate muscle protein synthesis. That helps to prevent muscle breakdown. And this process is driven by the essential amino acids, especially leucine. This acts like the ignition switch for muscle building. I was talking to a professor of ours from undergrad, Keith Barr, and he researches muscles, tendons, and ligaments. And he told me, he's like, leucine, you're going to start to hear a lot more about leucine in the research in the next decade or so because of how important it is for this muscle building pathway. Now, traditionally, animal-based proteins are considered superior for muscle growth because of the following reasons. Number one, they are higher in essential amino acids, particularly leucine. Like beef is very high in leucine, and the plant-based proteins like pea and soy and corn are not as high in leucine. They're also more digestible. Animal-based proteins are more digestible, especially in the whole food form, since plant foods often contain compounds that interfere with protein absorption. Plants have naturally built-in compounds like lectins that help to prevent their absorption and protect them, essentially. And then some plant proteins are more likely to be diverted to other uses in the body before they even reach our muscles. So older adults, this is especially important for you if you're listening to this because of that anabolic resistance that Nicole and I have been talking about that tends to happen in older adults. You actually need more high quality protein per meal. You need a stronger stimulus to get the same muscle building effect. Studies show that older adults may need up to 60 grams of some plant proteins to get the same muscle protein synthesis as 20 to 40 grams of whey protein. And this makes protein quality and quantity even more important as we age. So here's the deal. I think whey protein is probably one of the best sources of protein for muscle protein synthesis. Nicole's going to talk about protein powder in just a second here. But there are strategies you can use if you're vegan or vegetarian and don't, I guess vegetarian would be okay to eat like a whey protein, right?
It just depends, I think.
Yeah. But well, vegans do not eat any
animal products.
So vegetarian by definition, I think would be okay with that. So let's say you're vegan. You're like, I'm not going to do any whey whatsoever. I would recommend mixing and matching plant proteins. You can do a quick Google search to figure out which ones are high in the essential amino acids, specifically leucine. You could also supplement with leucine. You can get a leucine supplement on the interwebs. And there are some, leucine-rich plant proteins like soy or mycoprotein, which I think comes from some sort of like fungus or bacteria. And then plant protein powders tend to actually work better for muscle protein synthesis than getting your protein from plant-based foods. So Nicole, tell us about these protein powders.
Yeah, so protein powders, especially those with a high essential amino acid content like whey, soy, or pea proteins, are effective for muscle gain due to their ability to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. And consuming 20 grams or more of such, of the protein powders post-workout has been shown to significantly increase the muscle protein synthesis, which is really a key factor in promoting long-term muscle gains. So whey protein in particular works really well in helping to resist coagulation in the stomach, and it quickly moves it to the intestines, leading to a rapid spike in leucine levels in the blood within 40 to 60 minutes after ingestion. And this rapid absorption makes that whey protein particularly effective at stimulating muscle protein synthesis compared to other sources like tuna, turkeys, and eggs. So while protein supplements are convenient, the chronic effect of increased protein intake on muscle gain is influenced by the total amount of protein consumed rather than the timing or the type of protein. So what kind of protein powders would we recommend, and do we recommend them at all? So for a long time, we were in this don't take any protein powder or any supplements at all. And then what we found over the last, 15 to 20 years of coaching people is that most people just aren't getting enough protein in their diet. And that's just because of how busy our lives are. And so people often, They are going straight from work from their workout, and they don't have time to go home and have something that, is high in protein and get 30 grams of protein. And so the easiest thing for them is to have protein powder. And so we have started recommending that for people, especially just to make sure that they're getting that total, grams of protein per day at what it needs to be, because it's
and
hard.
Jamila will drop a link in the show notes about the protein powder we recommend and a discount code. For you guys.
Yeah. So we have 3 different protein powders that we use. We use Naked Whey, which is by far the most cost effective. It's probably my least favorite just because.
What is that per serving? Do you know?
I think it's about $1 and I think 35 cents per serving. And you can just get that on Amazon. You can also order it from their website. If you go to Momentous, which we have a discount code for you for that. That one, if you subscribe, it's about $1.54 per serving.
I think we have a discount for the first sign up too.
Yeah.
It might be less than the Naked Whey.
Yep. And so that one is a grass-fed whey. You want to make sure that you get the unflavored version, not the one with any flavorings. And that's just kind of true of anything. Like, you always want to look at the ingredients for things, because they'll say things like 100% grass-fed. And then you look at the back and they have natural flavors and added sugar and vegetable oil and all these things that interfere with our body's ability to absorb those nutrients, and also aren't good for our metabolic health. And so always look for, unflavored. And then the one that we do use mostly because our kids like it, we also like it too, especially when you're just drinking, milk and protein powder and creatine, is Ballerina Farms. That one is definitely a little bit more expensive. It's like $2 per serving. And we like the vanilla bean one. And it also has, I think, inulin. It has collagen in it as well. And so that one.
Colostrum.
And colostrum,
which has some interesting potential to help build muscle. Mm-hmm. And it's sweetened with stevia and monk fruit, which of the artificial sweeteners are, I think, the best too. Mm-hmm. And it does not have any artificial flavors or quote, natural flavors, which turns out are not actually all that natural.
Yep. So that one is a really good one. You can get on a subscription and save a little bit of money on that.
We can put that link in there too.
Mm-hmm. And so what do we eat in a day? So we talked about, protein powders. We talked about like how much protein you need to eat. And so you're probably thinking like, how do I actually eat all of this protein in a day? So I'm just going to talk through
1 scoop of protein powder at a time. That's how you eat it.
You know what? Funny story. Our daughter, our youngest Clara, who's 4, she's been really into eating more protein.
She's a true meathead in the true sense of the word. She takes her protein straight like a woman.
So she likes her meat like rare. She only wants rare.
Give me that red meat.
Yeah,
Dad.
she only wants the red meat. And she likes to eat, she puts in her yogurt in the morning, protein powder, but she likes just extra protein powder.
Don't mix it in.
Don't mix it in. She just wants to eat spoonfuls of the protein powder, which makes me gag, because any type of like.
It's because you're a real woman.
Yeah.
She's a manly woman. She's a tomboy.
Yep. So in the mornings.
Funny. Yeah. She's actually sprouted giant muscles. And just kidding. No, she's not. She's pretty chubby.
But she is strong.
Yeah, she is strong.
She's strong.
Yeah.
So what do we do in our day, and like, what is that actually, how does that play out in our lives? So we try to keep it as simple as possible. We try to stay consistent, and we're just in that phase of life with running a business and 3 kids and trying to keep up with our own health and workouts. And so we don't do anything fancy. Every day we literally have 3 to 4 eggs, each one of us. We usually add in some type of veggie or avocado on the side, or sometimes sauerkraut. And then on days when we don't have as much time, we'll do grass-fed Greek yogurt, which is great because it has higher protein content in it. And then we'll also often drink milk blended with protein powder and creatine. And then for lunch, we usually do grass-fed meatballs or bison patties. Sometimes I'll also supplement with like a beef stick if I'm on the go. And we often have that with like a veggie, sometimes, leftover potatoes or vegetables from whatever we had the night before. And Matt always likes to have sauerkraut with his lunch as well. And then at dinner, we always try to anchor our meals with a high quality protein. So it's usually beef, because that's what our kids like the most, and we get the least complaints about that. So we usually have beef or chicken, and that's like half of our plate.
Yeah.
So we eat a lot of, steak and grass-fed ground beef and, meatballs. Occasionally we'll mix in some fish. And then we always have a veggie. And then usually we'll have like sweet potatoes, sometimes sourdough bread, or regular potatoes, depending on the day. And then in the summer, especially when our kids are like, I want, ice cream, or I want popsicles, we often just try to do fresh fruit or frozen fruit.
So I eat about 140 to 200 grams of protein per day. I find that when I get up higher, like above 180, especially if I eat a lot of it at once, if I eat a lot of protein in the middle, I get a little gassy.
It's true. It's
tubey.
true.
Yeah.
And I would say
my stomach gets, sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh, no, it's okay.
My stomach just gets kind of irritated and I get the protein farts. And then it's not good for my marriage when I get the protein farts. Nicole questions, am I with the right man? He's so stinky, but his muscles are getting bigger. I don't know. She gets confused, but just kidding.
No, I just like when you don't fart as much.
Don't have protein farts. Yeah.
Yep.
That is better. It's better to not do that.
And then I would say, I think that eating enough protein has been something that I've grown in, and I've just been a lot more conscious of. And so I would say that I try to get, at least 30 to 40 grams per meal. So I probably end up averaging somewhere between like 100 to 120 grams of protein per day. I'm not always measuring that, like, because I have measured it and meticulously food tracked in the past. I kind of know what I need. And so now I'm just kind of able to roll that in and say, like, okay, I know I need 3 to 4 eggs here. And so I have just kind of built it into my life. But again, I would recommend, if you don't know what 30 to 40 grams of protein is, start by measuring your food and just be really meticulous about it. Food journal, we used levels, which you could just take pictures of your food and it'll tell you how many grams you're getting, what your serving size is, and it's really helpful if you're just starting out and kind of trying to figure out your macronutrients. So I would say, measure things at the beginning, and that way you actually start to know, like, okay, how much is 30 grams of protein? And you start to realize, like, it's a lot of food. And so that's, once you have learned those, like, about what it is, then you can take that as principles and apply that to your life long term. But if you haven't done that, then I would recommend measuring your food, weighing it, and really tracking your food in order to kind of see, like, if you're getting enough protein in your diet.
I love it. I wanted to finish by going through some frequently asked questions that we get. And some of these we have covered already, but we'll give just kind of some rapid fire answers to them. And the first one is too much protein bad for your kidneys? Frankly, this is a myth that seems like it just won't die. And even some physicians are warning that, too much protein can cause damage to the kidneys, especially in older adults. And the research shows that high protein does increase the workload on your kidneys, but not in an unhealthy way. And there's no evidence that high protein diets, even ultra high protein, like 3+ grams per pound of body weight per day, causes harm in healthy, normal people. Now, if you have existing kidney disease, you're probably going to want to work with a physician or a nephrologist to really understand what's going on with your kidneys. You take this one, Nicole. Can you absorb only 20 to 30 grams of protein per meal?
No. A lot of times you'll see online that you're wasting protein if you eat more than 30 grams in one meal, and that's absolutely not true, especially if you're active in your strength training. Your body absorbs all of it, and that muscle protein synthesis may max out in the short term, but the whole body protein use continues for hours. So bigger meals mean that, and more protein per meal means a bigger net benefit.
Okay, how about vegans? Do they need more protein to build muscle? So some people say that plant proteins are inferior. Others say they're equal if the diet's well planned. And I think the evidence shows you can build muscle on a vegan diet, but you probably need to be a lot more intentional and try a lot harder than somebody eating animal proteins. You're going to need larger doses. You're going to need to do like blends of protein to get different types, fortified powders, just to match or come close to the anabolic effect of a higher quality animal-based protein. Now, we talked about protein powder. Nicole, is it unhealthy or processed junk?
It can be. So it is processed, and that's one of the reasons why for so long we recommended that people didn't have protein powder, because they're just like, there wasn't a lot of good quality ones. They often had things like added sugar, natural flavors, chemicals, just like anything else that's processed. Like, it just has a long list of things that you really want to stay away from that have really a lot of negative effects for your health. And so now the beauty
is... And let's lump protein bars in with this too, because I see a lot of people eating these protein bars, and I think I really like where you're going with this, how it's probably not so black and white, like processed versus unprocessed, but it's not that, Yeah,
so I would say you are good to go with a high quality protein powder. You just really want to look at the ingredients. So the thing that you should look for is 100% grass-fed whey. Like that, if you're looking for a protein powder, I know we mentioned 3 of them earlier, but there's a lot of good ones on the market now. And I love that because I think there's more demand for high quality. And so there's just more people doing it well. And we don't just have, the ones that have all the additives anymore. Like we actually have high quality protein powders, which is great. And then for protein bars, like again, I don't think I've ever seen a protein bar that doesn't have like added sugar and a bunch of extra stuff that's just going to spike your blood sugar. And it really is not the best thing for you to eat if you're trying to increase your protein, especially things like power bars. There's all sorts of like, protein bars that people think are really high in protein, but they're actually higher in carbohydrates, which is quite ironic, but they're called, they're labeled with protein on the front. And so I would say like even things like a Snickers bar, it can say high protein on the front when really it's just a lot of chemicals and processed carbohydrates.
So the Quest bar, which is one of the most common ones that I'll get asked questions about, the ingredients are a protein blend, milk protein isolate, whey protein isolate. I'm fine with that. Polydextrose, which is a prebiotic fiber. I don't know a ton about that. Almonds, fine with that. Water, fine with that. Cacao butter, fine with that. Erythritol, that's a sweetener, yeah? Mm-hmm. Glycerin soluble corn fiber, natural flavors. It's got palm kernel oil, which is a vegetable oil. Sodium caseinate, lecithin, which is an emulsifier. Our bodies really do not like emulsifiers. And then sucralose, which is an artificial sweetener. So it's packed with ingredients that are going to wreak havoc on your body slowly over time. And maybe even in the short term. Some of these ingredients are really toxic for us as human beings and can cause long-term health issues, and just make us not feel good in the short term.
Yeah, I think all the additives in, protein powders and protein bars, just in general, like you just want to stay away from them. Unfortunately, there's just not really a protein bar that doesn't have all those added things. The thing that's probably closest to it is like a meat stick, because that's going to be higher in, actual protein. And so I would say if you're going to go with a protein bar, it should be a meat stick. Another good thing you can do is have nuts or, we like to have little nut packets, like almond butter packets. If you're like, oh, I need something that's easy and simple on the go, aim for things that are closer to real food, not things that have all of these things added in, that really doesn't resemble something that is, even remotely close to food.
All right. Does eating more protein make you fat? And people worry that, protein turns into body fat if they eat too much of it. And I think we've covered this one a few times throughout the podcast today. But the reality is protein is the least likely macronutrient to be converted to fat due to its high thermic effect, meaning it creates a lot of burn. It takes a lot of energy to burn protein. So your body actually has to utilize energy in the process of eating the protein, which means you will burn more calories. It's also very satiating or filling. So the more protein you eat, the less likely you're going to be to eat other foods. Whereas if you eat a diet based more on carbohydrates, you're going to be more likely to eat more total calories. Overeating on carbs and fat is much easier than overeating on protein-rich foods, and it's a much bigger problem. Like one of the reasons in the past and still we recommend eating less carbohydrates is because carbs spike insulin. Insulin is the fat storage hormone. Protein and fats do very little to spike insulin. In fact, they do almost nothing to spike insulin, so it just doesn't promote fat storage within the body, whereas carbs do. Anything else to add on that one?
Nope.
Will you develop giant muscles overnight, especially if you're a dainty lady?
No, you will not. No.
Okay.
You'll just build more lean muscle mass, and that's going to help you to have that more toned physique that I think a lot of women want.
Yep. I love it. How about endurance athletes? Do they still need higher protein, or is that just for lifters?
Yeah, I would say it's even more important, especially if they're not doing strength training, because like they're going to start to lose weight. If they do a lot of endurance exercise, like long runs, swimming a lot, they will probably lose, muscle if they're not actively doing something to maintain it. And so eating enough protein is so important for them. It also helps with tissue repair, your mitochondrial function, your immune system. And so if you don't have enough protein, then your body will pull from your muscles in order to get those nutrients, and that'll lead to muscle mass loss, which we all want to avoid.
Yep. I got this one recently. I'm 70 years old. Shouldn't I need less protein than a 30-something or than the RDA? And we covered this one earlier, but the answer is no due to anabolic resistance. Older adults actually need more protein protein per meal, more protein overall to stimulate the same amount of muscle protein synthesis as younger adults. Can high protein diets cause cancer? There are some studies linking high animal protein and IGF-1 levels with increased cancer risk, but the increases are so incredibly small that I would hesitate to call them statistically significant. And association does not mean causation. And there's so much other data showing that high protein diets, especially from mixed sources, can actually improve health outcomes like our muscle, which leads to better longevity. It can decrease inflammatory biomarkers, on and on and on. And I think context is really what matters here.
And I think another thing is with a lot of, studies, when they look at, like protein intake and cancer, like often that they're not just like Matt said before, like you can't just like isolate people and tell them they're only eating high quality animal protein. Like often their animal protein is like McDonald's hamburgers that's like paired with vegetable oils and a lot of processed carbohydrates and like low quality meats and, chicken that comes from, Kentucky Fried Chicken or Chick-fil-A. And so it's like they're eating such low quality animal proteins paired with all these other additives and antibiotics and chemicals and all these things that don't communicate well with our bodies. And so like I actually think that a lot of those, the effects or the increased risk, and someone could say cancer, is due to all of those other factors. Yeah. And it's really hard because you can't isolate those things. You can't just tell someone they're only going to eat high quality animal proteins for the rest of their life and then look at them 40 years later and see if they got cancer. It just doesn't work that way.
That was kind of back to what we were talking about with the Ward study earlier, where it's like you can't, it's really hard to pull this inferences from these research studies that ask people, well, what did you eat? And a lot of the studies that have vilified eggs and vilified red meat have come from these observational kind of question asking studies, asking people to tell us, hey, how many eggs do you normally eat over the last 10 years per day? And that's how they decide if eggs are bad or good or not. How about this protein timing thing? Do you need to slam a protein shake within 30 minutes after you lift, or is it bro science?
I think for women and older adults, yeah. Or just get protein in after you lift.
Yeah, I think too, there's something, I found that starting to do protein shakes again has been, it's almost like a keystone habit that makes me feel like I'm healthier. It just like, it reinforces the strength training. It's like, okay, I do my strength training, I have my protein shake, and it's like I've closed the loop. And I know that I've done something good for my muscles, even if it doesn't matter all that much in the big scheme of things. I feel like it helps me feel better about myself. And that's what I'm here for, is to feel better about myself. That's why we're podcasting, is to feel better about ourselves.
I hope not. I think it's more to help people.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Yes. I'm not narcissistic. All right. Last question. Do you need protein to lose weight or just fewer calories?
So you can lose weight, but you can also lose muscle mass, which we talked about earlier. And so high protein diets will help to protect that lean mass, and it'll also just help with long-term fat loss success.
Awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's a wrap.
Yeah.
Until next time, this is the Strength for Life podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. We really want to know what you think. And we'll give people shout outs as they leave reviews on the pod. And you may even win some free swag.
Yep.
Maybe some creatine, maybe some protein powder. We've got some cool stuff to give away.
Exciting.
Yep. Until next time. See ya.